Okay, it's just setting it up. Okay, it's just setting it up.
Sure, thanks, Anisha.
Okay, so I think we are already live streaming. I have the link, so I can share it on Slack with you guys. But there's a slight lag because I can hear my voice. I think I'll remove the YouTube link to this. Just a minute.
We
So I've
can
just
also copy the
pasted-
streaming link.
Yeah, I've just pasted it on the Slack group.
Yeah. Should we put it on the channel also?
But
No, no, we don't need to put it anywhere.
all our guests will be accessing it. Will be accessing this Zoom link, right?
Correct, correct. Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't need
yeah,
to
yeah.
share it anywhere. Yeah, let's not share it anywhere.
Cool.
Yeah, in fact, Anisha, is there a way we can pause this and then restart at when the panel starts and just delete this bit that has probably been streamed already?
I'm not sure how to do that, honestly. Let me just
Sure,
check.
okay.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Let's just continue with it.
All right.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. We'll wait for a couple of minutes for members to join, and then we'll start the panel discussion. Meanwhile, I'll request panelists and the moderator if they can switch on their videos. I think that will be helpful to familiarize your faces with all the participants. Smriti, let me know when we can start. If you're confident that there are enough number, I think we should go ahead with it.
Yeah, I think we can start now, Pranav.
Timeline. Thanks so much, Smriti. Hi everyone, I am Pranay from Not-for-Profit Advisory Unit of Satwa. Welcome to today's panel discussion. Allow me to quote one of my favorite Maya Angelou quote, and that says, I have learned that people will forget what you say, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I have witnessed that, and my fellow Satwans would agree that our organization has always taken that effort to ensure that we hear everyone, create spaces that make everyone heard and included. It is because of this culture and able leadership that we have DEI, that is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group in place at Satwa. Our sincerest gratitude and appreciation to the leadership team at Satwa for creating such employee-centric and inclusive culture in this organization. Coming to our today's event, for which we all have gathered today, the Satwa DEI team, with the support from Satwa Knowledge Institute, is organizing a panel discussion on women's market labor force participation. We have esteemed panelists who have graciously agreed to be on this panel. It's an honor and a great privilege to introduce them to you all. Our first panelist is Punarbhav Banik, with whom I had an opportunity to work in 2017. Punar has been associated with Seva Bharat as a state development coordinator for 4 years, where she has led the project management, development strategies, fundraising, and state operations across state of Jharkhand, West Bengal, and Odisha. Her work aims to assist women workers in the unorganized sector to secure decent wages and dignified working conditions. Previously, Punarbhuva was a Gandhi Fellow with Kavala Education Foundation, where her responsibilities included working with various stakeholders across municipal schools in adjusting slums of Thane and Maharashtra. She has completed her MA in Development Studies from Ambedkar University, Delhi. Punar, I welcome you to today's panel discussion. Our second panelist is, thank you so much, Punar. Our second panelist is Madhu Khaitan. Madhu is a development professional who has worked with Pradhan for closely 30 years now. She has passed out of Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow in 1989, and shortly thereafter chose to pursue rural development. Madhu is recognized for her pioneering work on gender equity through Women's Collective, focusing on women's understanding of gender in their everyday life and catalyzing issues of gender stereotypes, injustice, discrimination, and assessing public services and programs. In the last couple of years, she has been involved in steering an ambitious multi-partner, multi-state initiative supported by UN Women and focus on unleashing women's economic empowerment through multiple pathways of education, empowerment, and entrepreneurship. Madhu, I welcome to today's panel discussion. Happy to have you on the panel. Our third panelist is Naina Chaudhary. Naina is part of Breakthrough organization, and Satwa and Breakthrough has long working engagement, and we've been working with now also. Naina has been working in not-for-profit sector for 2 decades now. She has spent equal amount of time with organizations working in the community at national and international donors such as IKEA Foundation, Tata Trust, developing and implementing projects in countries of Asia and Africa. She's currently a senior director at Breakthrough, leading direct implementation, co-leading strategic partnerships and scale-up. Breakthrough is 23 years old organization working on gender norm change to make violence and discriminations against women and girls unacceptable. Breakthrough has been working to address unfavorable norms around working women that makes mobility challenge for women and girls. This has led to creation of aware group of youth who not only change their behavior around women in public spaces, but also are active bystanders. Naina, I welcome to today's panel discussion. Satwa family welcome the luminaries to the panel discussion on women market labor force participation. Now I invite Sadhna from Livelihood PA Satma Knowledge Institute to take over the charge and moderate the session. Over to you, Sadhna.
Thank you, Pranay. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. It's great to have you all be part of this event today, for which we are joined by 3 incredible panelists. Thank you, Punar, Madhu, and Nayana for being so generous with your time and agreeing to participate in what we believe is a necessary and timely discussion. Today's panel discussion will pivot around the idea of women and their labor. In quantitative terms, this is measured by tracking women's participation in the labor force. These measurements revolve around market-centric ideas of economic activity, production, and labor. Labels and definitions that do not always map onto the kind of labor that women in India undertake. Nevertheless, this remains an incredibly crucial metric. This is a closely tracked indicator, both domestically and internationally, as a measure of the country's development progress, as well as the strides that it takes towards gender equality. In this context, therefore, there has been a lot of discussion around India's low female labor force participation rate, with ecosystem efforts being undertaken to bring more women into the workforce. However, we believe that rather than engaging with this figure from a purely statistical and mathematical point of view, it is critical to challenge our underlying assumptions about women and their work. And these assumptions continue to underpin the way in which data around women's work is collected and measured. Indian women are, in fact, constantly laboring, but a significant portion of their work remains invisible and consequently devalued in official accounts. Examples include the unpaid care work that they disproportionately shoulder, as well as the contributions that they make towards family enterprises, as well as own account production. How do we measure the type of work that remains outside the purview of official accounts? Alternative approaches have been suggested on how we can include such types of work, such as the third-party criterion. This criterion aims to measure the value of a piece of work by the possibility of outsourcing it to a third party and the cost of doing so. For example, a woman cooking in the kitchen could be measured by the cost it would take to have someone else come and perform the same type of labor. However, these measures also center a market-based approach towards labor, which don't always account for the social and human value of a majority of women's work, especially the reproductive labor that they undertake. Therefore, we believe it's critical to develop an alternative lens that accounts for the value of women's labor in more than just quantitative and market terms. Today's discussion will therefore focus on unpacking these assumptions and exclusions. It will aim to understand how and why women's work continues to be undervalued and invisible, women's perceptions around their own work, and how organizations working on women's economic empowerment can mainstream a more holistic lens in their interventions. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for what promises to be an exciting discussion on a topic of urgent relevance. A good starting point for this conversation is to understand how women themselves perceive their labor. How do women see their work, both within and outside the household? And how can we make visible their economic contributions, both at the level of the worker as well as an institutional and policy level? To start off this discussion, I'd like to invite our first panelist, Hunar Baba, to open the panel discussion. She works with the Self-Employed Women's Association, which has been engaging with precisely these questions and working on organizing women workers in the informal sector. Hunar Baba, it's great to have you here. Over to you.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, my video was glitching a bit. But hi everyone, I am Punar Bhava and I work, it's still glitching, no? Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Punar Bhava and I work for the Self-Employed Women's Association, Seva Bharat. Seva Bharat is a national level federation of the different Seva organizations, and our role is to primarily work with women in the informal economy and to work with their rights and ensure that they have decent working conditions and have fair wages in the conditions that they work in. Over the past 50 years that Seva has worked in, female labor force participation has been something that we've worked very, very closely with. But, when we talk about perceptions and ideas of women, most of the women that we work with in the informal economy, firstly, are either from rural and urban setups, but these are also women who are from the lower income levels and mostly from marginalized communities. And what we consider, as the bottom of the pyramid. So if you look at the economic system with a lot of people with access to resources and wealth at the top of the pyramid, women who are part of the informal economy are at the very bottom of this pyramid. They are the largest contributors to the economy, but these are the most unrecognized workers, as most of them are self-employed or daily wage workers. So a lot of their contribution to the economy is something which is not recognized at both the ends. Speaking of the workers themselves, firstly, because there is no terminology, there is no recognition of the work that these workers are. Of course, over the years, certain trades, certain type of work have been recognized by the government, have been recognized by different sectors. However, because of these workers being very unorganized in their nature of work, being very informal, not having a specific place of work, not having fixed hours of work, also facing a lot of challenges regarding irregularity of work, payment, and all of that. It's very difficult for us to classify them under any specific type of work. Therefore, it's very difficult to explain to them that they are a kind of worker and that there is a contribution that they have towards the economy. Seva has been working with these workers for the past 50 years. However, the challenge still continues because of 2-3 factors that I would like to highlight. First being the seasonality of work these women are involved with, right? Because these are women who are not involved in any one particular type of work throughout the year. It causes a lack of recognition for them to any one particular type of work. And because the nature of their work is such that they are doing multiple works, it's very difficult for us to also classify them under any one particular act. So the recognition is also very difficult. There is irregularity of payment. Most of them get paid in cash. There is no fixed source of payment or income that works for these women workers. So it's very difficult for them to also understand that if they don't have a regular source of income, then they can't perceive that, yes, that they are a worker and that there is a system of regularized payment. So that again is something that works with the perception. The third is, the issues of migration and challenges that these women face, which also play a major factor as to why these women don't see themselves as workers. But, there is the flip side to that also, because more than these workers themselves recognizing themselves as workers of contributors to economic, any kind of participation, is the society doesn't perceive them. We live in a heavily patriarchal society, and most of our workers are such whose work is often counted or recorded as family work or family labor. So their individual labor, the individual work contribution that each of them have, is not recorded as their own labor, but rather considered as part of a family labor concept. Along with that, they have lots of unpaid work and care work responsibilities as female members of the household. So it takes away from a lot of their income generating activities if we look at it. The other perception that becomes is that these workers themselves have, so like I was saying, I'll go back and forth, but the idea is that there is a gap at both the end. Workers have now started getting recognition because for a lot of schemes that have developed, a lot of boards that have developed for their welfare, for a lot of social security schemes that have come in, be it, having job cards, having specific boards for construction workers or unorganized worker boards, or migration labor cards that are given by by some state governments. But some social security, like the Bengal government gives the Binamulya Samajic Suraksha Yojana, which is a social security for the unorganized worker, or be it the e-shram, which of course they have certain downsides to it. We still don't know what the benefits of the e-shram are, but it still gives a recognition to the worker, a classification of what there is. So that consciousness is something that is being developed in the workers. However, they still struggle because firstly, they have been so invisible in the supply chain or in the market force, or the challenges that they face in trying to access anything, be it the market, be it any kind of government scheme, especially as women in the labor force, that it has been very, very difficult and still continues to be, because it's a change process of even mindsets. It's not just, that I record the data and I show the data. It is also mindsets, right? So for example, if any kind of enumerator comes to any informal women worker, and we ourselves have seen that, ki aap kya kaam karte ho? What is your work? Most of them don't even understand the work that they do. And this is a question that still continues to be, right? And if they don't even see that they are contributors, then the work never gets recorded. In one of the reports that Seva did in the state of Bihar, where we worked with informal women workers and their contribution, the labor force participation at that point was 11%. But the task force report that Seva came up with was 56%. And when this report was presented to the then CM of Bihar, his reaction was, I am pretty sure that this data is even low because a lot of women workers are not recognizing their contribution to the economy. So it's a lot of that. It's trying to understand what are the challenges that women workers face. So, in the context of Seva, the idea is not just working with that perception, but also working with the community around, and also using different tools of working on mindset change, helping the community understand, and a lot of shift in women workers understanding that they're economic contributors. So I think those are 3-4 points that, that act as barriers and act as challenges for women workers when they perceive their labor force participation.
Thanks so much, Punar, for outlining those points. I think it's extremely interesting to understand how the consequences of decades of entrenched invisibility and how we are still working to sort of remedy that. And I have some questions for you, which I would love to circle back to during our Q&A session. And following on from the points that you raised on the invisibility and visibility at the institutional and worker level, I think it's becoming increasingly clear that any interventions that are working to advance women's economic autonomy and independence address this crucial lever of invisibility. We must therefore ask, how can a more holistic perspective of women's work be mainstreamed in the work of civil society, grassroots organizations, and other stakeholders working in the space? And also ask how we can build synergies between women's economic empowerment as well as their well-being more generally, both within and outside the workplace. To speak to this point, I'd like to invite our second panelist, Madhu Ketan from Pradhan, who has decades of experience working directly with women and collectives at the grassroots level. So thanks so much, Madhu, for being part of this panel, and over to you.
Thanks, Adna, and thanks to the larger SAPA team to, first of all, to, invite me on the panel, but also, to convene a discussion on this, very important subject. So, I'll start off by briefly introducing myself. I've been associated with Pradhan, as Pranay mentioned. My work has been, mainly, Pradhan works on, is known as an organization that works with women's collectives and works with them on issues of livelihood and natural resource management, etc. My work has also been centered around these, but also on how these organizations, women's collectives, can emerge as institutions that, following a broader approach of socio-economic, political empowerment and advancing, these issues on behalf of their members. So the question that you have asked me to speak on is something, which has been something which is close to my heart. And so I think one is I would like to, the question primarily is, how do you kind of build synergies between women's economic empowerment and improving their well-being, both within and outside the home? So in this context, one is the work that Pradhan has done directly with communities since 1983. But very recently, for the last 3-4 years, we have also been much engaged with the question of how do you engage with the public systems to actually, on this entire approach of, strengthening women's collectives, and particularly around the agenda of livelihoods. And because these are women's collectives, gender is kind of, inherent in the discourse. So we are doing a disservice if we are forming women's collectives, but those women's collectives are not addressing issues of gender. So we've been working with the National Rural Livelihood Mission, which is now I think one of the largest, such program across the world, and has mobilized close to 9 crore women across the country. Now, in our work with NRLN, one is that, although the groups are formed around, as the name itself indicates, the agenda is livelihood promotion. But if you see, because the groups start from a financial intermediation, it may not always translate from a financial to an economic enhancement imperative. So that's one, one of the things that that we saw, and our own work, bringing that in also because of its relevance, has been that the question that you also started off with, Sadhna, that One is that women themselves do not see, their own identities as economic actors, which is a very important, issue, especially from a statistical perspective. But, also, I mean, when women are recognized as economic actors, there are various other kinds of implications also. The other thing that, however, when we kind of, as we worked in the villages, has been the question that, yesterday also there was this very important event that was organized by SEVA, in which, Ilab had very evocatively said that poverty itself is violent. So one is the question of, share of the cake. But the other question, very important, which women themselves will tell you, is that the size of the cake also needs to increase. That's something that, Pradhan has been focused on doing. How can the, income of the entire household be increased? And also in a manner that women have a say in determining, the kind of livelihood choices. And women also have a joint control over the assets, as well as the, the income streams that arise from the, livelihoods undertaken. So that would be my, nudge, and that, while we consider issues related to women not being counted as, either as farmers or fish rearers, poultry farmers, there are numerous identities, but, we also need to see how can the entire thing be made more vibrant, and, women's role as significant economic actors be enhanced. The other thing, is which flowing and interconnected with this point is that, sometimes when we as CSOs or as government undertake livelihood activities, the focus shifts from a strong V lens to, actually promoting the livelihood activity. While it may be important in the initial phases, etc., but I would say, that is very important, because the women's economic empowerment lens is something that needs to guide the entire process right from the inception and through the different phases of piloting and expansion, scale up, etc. So we should not always assume that, that is in place. And that's been something that, we and NRLM is also kind of focused on doing. Yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing is that also the need to recognize that, there is a deficit of services, and particularly, the many women are, experiencing violence, and there is a significantly large number. And so therefore, there is a rationale for also plugging the vast gap which exists in our country when it comes to, access to war services, which, may be a lived reality of not a small number of women. And that itself, can lead many women to come into the, being able to undertake economic activities. Of course, there are various other things, the access to care services also, which the state, again, there is a mandate for the state to be able to provide care services like early child care and, daycare centers, etc., because of which, women are, we are seeing the care of the elderly, etc., because of which women are not able to participate in various kinds of, economic activities. The other thing, is we in Pradhan, taking the example of Pradhan, we saw that, even as, agriculture was improving and food supply was therefore also becoming more available, but it was not getting translated into nutrition outcomes for, for the entire family, but also for women and children. So this also is an arena, this question of whether women's economic empowerment leads to their well-being is also, and one cannot really make assumptions. So in Pradhan, we are kind of trying to integrate a nutrition perspective within agriculture interventions also. And lastly, I would just 2 points: reduction in drudgery, because many times when we undertake livelihood intervention, it results in women becoming more burdened with work. Now, so therefore, one has to also, as we kind of undertake various, improved agriculture, it tantamounts to, more weeding, more spraying, various kinds of things. So therefore, are we really sensitive to, those issues? And are we looking at it and trying to, make solutions, solution building around that also? And lastly, we've also seen that there is a need for more specific lens around including women and poorest of poor really in the bottom 5%, because even the SHG movement has not been able to actually include them in their fold. And when we do include them, how much are they able to actively participate? So therefore, there has to be some kind of a specific focus on their integration and inclusion, as well as, customization of our livelihood approach, which may need to include a social security lens apart from the, regular livelihoods field. So I think I'll end here. Sorry for this slightly long, sharing. Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Madhu. I think that was an extremely eloquent summation of what we're here to discuss today, especially the imperative of redistributing labor, which is crucial to reducing women's time poverty and the double burden that they undertake. So thanks so much for the points that you've raised today. And from the discussion so far, I think some common threads are emerging regarding the consequences of women being invisible as economic actors and what we can do to increase that visibility as well as in their agency and well-being. And now I'd like to maybe pivot the discussion a little bit more towards efforts that can be undertaken to improve this visibility and the issues that continue to persist with viewing visibility from purely monetary, quantitative, and market-based lenses. And as a corollary, also discuss what are some alternative approaches and lenses that we can take, especially as a room full of development practitioners, that would enable us to recognize and value women's contributions in a holistic manner that centers their humanity, agency, and dignity. To speak on this issue, I'd like to invite our final panelist, Nayana from Breakthrough, to conclude the panel discussion portion of our program today. Nayana, thanks so much for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, perfectly.
Thanks. You know what? I was hearing Punarbhava and Madhu, and I was thinking that if I just keep underlining the points they have made already, that's my talk today done. Because I just take a leaf out of Madhu's page. She talked about economic empowerment lens and how it is very, very important. Very recently, Pranay and I both were traveling to Odisha, and we were in Mayurbhanj in a room full of teachers who were being trained in gender. And when we asked who among them have their debit cards that they use themselves, in a room full of people who had come to do gender training as teachers and have been working for 10, 15, 20 years, only 2 of them were handling their own debit cards themselves. So there is a long way to go. It's not only earning, like Madhu is saying, it's a whole question on economic empowerment and making sure that whatever a woman is earning is ending up in the plates of the woman, and it is shifting her nutrition levels. So coming back to this whole question of women's work and how women's work is viewed, when I was talking to Sadhana, I was talking about that Breakthrough works around norm change. And when we look at what are the norms around working women, we see that, like, how is a working woman perceived in the community? She is seen as somebody who goes at odd hours, who she goes with, where she comes. When she comes back, she's watched all the time. She can be called an easy woman. She can be called a woman who does not take care of her children well. So her position itself is very, very shaky within the community. Now, how is a family perceived when a woman works from that family? Yeah. So you will see that the family is always going to say, "Hamare ghar mein औरतें काम नहीं करती हैं." And whenever I hear this, I want to ask that, oh, okay, men cook and clean in your houses. Yeah. So, but this is that they think that it's a question of family prestige, that women are not going to be part of paid work, and women themselves who are part of this extremely patriarchal system, they themselves, like Punarbhava said, they would say that we don't work, we help, or they would say कि मैं कुछ ज्यादा नहीं करती, मैं थोड़ा बहुत काम कर लेती हूँ. They are always apologetic about their economic earning. And why? So this is completely this norm around working women, and how they and the families in which they reside are seen is a very big barrier to women identifying themselves as working women. So the first thing that happens is, whenever the pie that Madhu is talking about, the cake that Madhu is talking about is not large enough, the first one to get out of that cake is the woman. That woman is not going to get a part of that cake because she was already very, she was willy-nilly there. And the family was also making some adjustment for her to be willy-nilly there. Now, the other norms around women's mobility, the norms around double burden, the norms around violence in workplace. Madhu talked about domestic violence, but also the whole question of violence in workplace, the gender-based discrimination in workplace. Breakthrough has been working in a project which in true breakthrough fashion was named Stree Link, and where we were thinking of linking women together, wherein we saw that in the garment factories, you will see that the people in the factory floor, the shop floors, are women. But who are the supervisors? They're always men. And put this lens onto your taxpayer category. So if you look at your taxpayers, you will see that about 34% or 35% of the taxpayers, women taxpayers, are below 26. And about an equal amount of taxpayers are above 50. So what is happening between that 26 to 50? These women actually vanish, and you will find this in the southern areas wherein the women work in the garment factories quite a lot, and similarly in Faridabad in the other and similar areas. Now, what does the market consider as measurable is another question that comes into my mind. Like, we have been working in the sector for quite some time, and we constantly ask that a farmer who is producing her own produce and eating it in her own home, do you even consider that as part of your GDP? If you do not consider that as part of your GDP, then how are you even saying that who is working in the market and who's not? We generally do not know who is contributing to, in what way, to the market forces. So now, very recently, there has been an effort to monetize women's work, and wherein I become very uncomfortable. I become very uncomfortable because your market systems itself is not fair. Is it like when you talk about third-party criteria, when you try to say that I want to measure a woman's work in a household by measuring how much I would have paid a cook for the same work or a cleaner for the same work, do you pay the cook or the cleaner fairly? Is there fair wage system in this country? What is the amount that we are paying? So here is a market which is already extremely unfair to wage laborers. And then you are using that yardstick to measure a woman's work at home. I think it's a lost game. You are playing into the hands of people who have already taken care of you in the market in terms of wage work, and now we feminists will get into that same market and the same playing field, and it's like their playing field, wo aapko pachhad ke marenge, So this is what I think we should clearly avoid that trap. So can it be monetized, and should it be monetized, is a question that I ask all the time, because care work is not only about actually cooking the food. Like if you look at what Kamala Hassan has said so many times, that when a man comes home, and I want to, in my years that I live, I want to say this, that when a woman comes home, the partner takes care of him, and I almost think of it like a cushion which is puffed up. The partner is taken care of, the partner is given food, made to feel better, so that the partner can go back into the market and earn for the next day. Now, can this be monetized? But I also see the trap in that, because if it cannot be monetized, if I completely want to say that what a woman does cannot be monetized, then I'm also falling for the trap in which people are going to tell me that हम तो पहले से ही बोलते थे, और औरत तो देवी होती है, उनके काम का तो कोई मोल ही नहीं है. So no, भाई, I don't want that. I don't want कि मेरे काम का कोई मोल नहीं है. Don't put me into that category. Also, I do not want to play into the category of you putting me, you equating me to a labor market which you have already regulated to be unfair. I want some other system. The system is that, what Punarbhava was talking about. When you talk about family labor force, I talk about communities, even fisher folk communities, in which you will not be able to say who did what, like who pulled the net, who cleaned the fish, who took the fish out of the big nets. They all did everything. So you are not going to say who's a fisher folk, who cleans, who pulls it, who's actually rowing the boat, who does what. It's the whole community doing something together. So instead of people adjusting or women adjusting their work according to the market's favorite systems, market should gear up to change its terminology, to ask a woman in her own language, what did she do during the day, and should be able to put it in a system which is going to be able to measure it. And do not tell me that anything that is non-quantifiable cannot be measured, because as human beings, this is our capability that makes us human, to be able to think of things which cannot be seen in quantity. Murt roop mein jo nahi dekha ja sakta, we can also conceptualize those things. So be a human and make your measure sticks according to the things that need to be measured. The things to be measured cannot be turned to suit your measuring sticks, is what is my submission. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Naina. You've certainly given us so much to think about. Before we move into a round of Q&A and I open it up to the audience, I just want to check in with our three panelists, whether you have any concluding remarks that you would like to share. If so, the floor is yours for the next 10 minutes as well. or if you're okay to go directly to the Q&A session, then I would like to open it up to the audience, whom I think will all have quite a bit of questions for you. Just a few rules to keep in mind during the Q&A time. If you want to ask a question, please do raise your hand and then unmute yourself to speak. If you would rather put your question into the chat, you can feel free to do so. I will be keeping a close eye on the chat box and monitoring that as well. So whichever way you would like to pose your question to the panelists, you can feel free to do so. And if your question is for a particular panelist, please do mention that and I can direct it to them. Thanks so much. Yes, Meenakshi, I see your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Apologies, I joined a little late. My question is not directed to anybody, but it was interesting that, you know, the double burden and the childcare opportunity that is not being provided as a support for a working woman to come out. I belong to the formal workforce, but still I have my own set of challenges I could understand as to what the informal workforce has. So my question and my understanding, what I seek is from the panelist is, how do we talk about family as a unit? Because where a woman wants to step out to contribute to, you know, the economic contribution in the family and contribute to the labor force, how are we talking and influencing and helping the family make that decision? Because this is an old age, what do you say? It is something that has come from generations. It's something that is persistent. Unless that unit is influenced or it decides that it is a norm, it should be accepted that women work in initiatives or in the programs that we are working on. How do we make sure that the family is taken care of? They have their mindsets, they accept, and hence the woman is stepping out. She therefore has the support from the partner, the husband, from the mother-in-law who hasn't worked, and from others in the family, women who are not working. So if my question is clear, I just want to know, how are we influencing the family as a unit to be able to support a woman who's working?
Nayana,
Can I go? Yeah, I'll go because anything that we are unsure of, I'm the first one. I think we will try. So now, Meenakshi, like I'm saying, the same old is not going to work. Yeah. So the new norm has to settle in. This is even more important to understand that norm is normative, not normal. It's often said that this is normal. Women stay at home, they take care of children, they are supposed to know this better. This is normative. This is not normal. So as you are saying that a new norm needs to take place, similarly, I think as more women are going to be in the workforce, and like Madhu has mentioned, the care work is going to be much more well taken care of, even in the office space. I totally believe that the segment that Punarbhava probably works with, I have always felt that there should be creches available for the women who are going for labor into other people's homes. Most of their money is spent on childcare because there is nobody else to take care of their children. You know, their children fall ill. So yes, there is a need of creche to take care of them. And also, I think children are a community responsibility. Everybody's responsibility. We have to stop believing that children is like the mother's responsibility and the mother is going to take care of it. And like I'm saying, it's normative. There is a which battle you're going to pick up at what level in your own family. That's a big question. But don't, like, you know, I'm just putting myself out there, but, you know, family as a system is a system that was created to take care of a certain way of living. Yeah. If you read historically, why was family created in this manner? It was created because we wanted to be settled agriculturists. Now human race has moved forward. The family needs to also move forward, is what is my submission. Anybody else?
I don't know, our experience has been that it's not, I mean, most families will kind of, I mean, settle for a choice which is overall advantageous for the family. I mean, of course, this does not always hold true, and there are several barriers, etc., that come in. But in a large number of cases, we've seen that happen. So, I mean, all of us have seen the examples, and I'm saying those because, those are more obvious examples that, when the wife gets, say, a sarkari naukri, and the husband, we've all seen that, the husband will then start taking on some of the care work and, actually relocate to the place where the, wife is in case of, that's a more obvious, most obvious examples that we may have all seen. And that's why I'm saying those. But more subtle examples that we've also experienced is that, when it comes to, say, I mean, women taking the lead in, say, agriculture, governance, Gram Sabha participation, etc. I mean, it's not that, that they're being, I mean, we have seen that, there is the household will actually make space for, women to actually be able to take on those roles. And of course, there are, I mean, strong initial normative barriers, etc. But of course, when it comes to young women's mobility outside of local areas, outside of states, there are very strong apprehensions. And I mean, realistically so, our cities being what they are, and lack of various enablers, including accommodation, that's a different matter. And even though it may make economic sense, families will still kind of say, don't go to Tirupur garment cluster, because I'm saying this because Nayana mentioned it. So things like that. But yeah.
Yeah, I may also, so building on what both Madhuji and Nainaji said, the idea still remains that because of what we've been saying, that because there is such an invisibility of the type of work that they do and the lack of services, so any kind of issue that raises in the family, it directly hits a woman's income or her access to go and start working, water issues, childcare services, anyone falls sick. So, if you look at programs that need to be developed that can help the family as a unit recognize the importance of women's work, is also to support the entire household with these additional responsibilities and additional things. So a lot of programs should also, work on getting them access to their social security, not just as citizens, but also as workers. Get them maternity benefits, holidays, or whatever that long list of rights as workers are, helping them get basic access to services, infrastructural services. They struggle with high rates of rent. Most of them are migrant workers. They suffer with high rent, water services, lack of sanitation, toilet services that are available. So, all of them, if on a day-to-day crisis, women have to deal with a lot of daily crises also that come in. So therefore, it takes away from a lot of their economic contribution that, you compare it to a man in terms of income, is often not considered, and it takes away from her productive hours. So, for the family to recognize that this person is also an important economic contributor and that she is a worker, the systems around her also need to be enabling so that she can then go forward and give her time to the economic aspect of her labor also. I think programs designed like that, which a lot of organizations, including Seva, are also working on it, get them the access to the basic right, get them the right of their land. If you're living in Delhi for 40 years, get them the land, the, ghar ka kagas, or the electricity bill in their name. So all of those things are programs that will help the family understand. her as economics.
Thanks so much, all of you. Couldn't agree more with everything all of you have said. Shreya has a question. Shreya, feel free to unmute and ask.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. This has been really insightful to hear your opinions and thoughts. I actually have two questions, so I'm going to put forth both the questions, but in the interest of time, if you're able to answer just one, that's also fine. So my first question is that over the years, we've seen that the enrollment in school for girls has increased, and so has the number of students who are enrolling in college, like in terms of females. But we've seen that the female labor force participation is decreasing. So what, according to you, are some of the challenges that is hampering the school to work transition for females? So that's my first question. And secondly, I think maybe the right person might be Nayana for this, that in case if there are any innovative programs that some organizations are working on to build that agency in girls right from a young age, that just having gender socialization and having gender like an understanding of gendered roles. So what are some of those programs that are being implemented in the ecosystem right now? So it would be great to hear a little about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shreya. I think you very rightly said that we are actually looking for a study. If you find a study, it will be very helpful if you can send us. We're looking for a study that can link higher education of women to higher rate of participation in work, and we haven't so far. Like, if women complete school, etc., I think Madhu will be able to tell how many of her classmates are still in the workforce, and we see that IIM is one place from which women do not remain in the workforce. Now, what causes this? I think what causes this is the norm. The norm is that women are supposed to be taking care of the family, and it is not a norm to. So, for example, if I am a good mother, I'm given a lot of accolades, and if Pranay is a great, he's very, what is it called? He's like a cutthroat. He's a competitor. He's like very, very much there in his work. So that's a compliment for him. The same thing is not a compliment for a woman. Yeah. So the language, so what we are perpetuating as norms is very different. The second thing that will link me to your second question is this, that we see that adolescents do not have, especially adolescent girls, do not have any aspiration in our country. They mostly do not know what they want to do, and there is no dream. And when we talk about what skills and what are the good things about them, we have a gender transformative curriculum which has a chapter called Mujh Mein Hai Kuch Khas. I have something special in me. And when we start the discussion and we say that what is one of your gun, आपके एक virtue क्या है? They say हम हमेशा अपनी बड़ों की बात मानते हैं. We always listen to our elders, and we hold our heads in our hearts, thinking that if you keep listening to your elders, then this is what the world is always going to stay. And also, girls are never given role models. So you, Shreya, Sadhna, or somebody like me or Madhu or Punarbhava are not role models for them, because nobody is becoming anything big from their own community. Unless you can build role models from their own context and own areas, it's very difficult for them to see where they can go. Okay, now then comes the opposite norms of ladki agar earn karti hai to hum ladki ka nahi khate, right? Ladki kama ke nahi deti hai, mobility and double burden and all that. So norm. Now what do we do with the adolescent girls? We work through a social ecological model, and we have a gender transformative curriculum which is at present working in 4 states, and at any given point in time we work with 100,000 adolescent girls. It may look very big in any other country, but in India, it's like a minuscule thing because 23% of our population is in that adolescent age group. But we work with younger adolescents and older adolescents, and we have been focusing on aspiration. So I want to finish this line by giving you a line of hope that by working in a very focused manner, by connecting each of our each module of our curriculum with aspiration, what we have got is 28% of our girls in the first year itself is being able to say what they want to become and what's the pathway of becoming that. That's a very, very big change, and it gives us a lot of hope. And as the director program, when we are deciding with the program team that next year kis pe focus karna hai, so we want to stay with aspiration for some time. We want to see this change for some time. So that's my response. Yeah.
Thank you, Nayana, and thank you, Shreya, for your question. We have a question from Mansha in the chat. I'm just going to read the question out. In many industrial setups, women are employed in lower skilled jobs, and often people quote that women can't take up the higher skilled job. How can these industrial norms be changed and bring more pay equity? At times, women themselves don't realize that they have the capacity to take up these higher skilled jobs. I'd actually like to direct this question to you, Punarbhava, and also talk about and have you comment a little bit more on the consequences of the entrenched invisibility, even in terms of how a woman perceives her own ability. Yeah, it would be great to hear from you on this point, I think.
Yeah, but for this point, I'd actually like to build on what Naina ji said, that, these girls, for the lack of a better word, don't have a lot of aspirations. And that is because of the conditioning that has happened with them over the years. So these are, when anybody is going to enter the labor force, right? There is firstly no clear pathways for these young girls or the women who just, are at the threshold of whether completed higher education or have migrated to a new place because of marriage or any other kind of situation. They don't have access to market or access to a labor place where they can actually go and start engaging in any different kind of work. So what it leads to is them to resort to either the family income that is there or to try and build on a few skills that they might have learned over the years. The other thing is that for a lot of these women workers, from a very young age, they are engaged in these traditional livelihoods also. So for example, bidi workers or weaving, any kind of work that you see, agriculture, these are girls who are always very hidden and are part of the economic contribution of the household from the ages of 7, 8 in a lot of times. But because it's easier because it's like supporting your mother in the kind of income generation that she's doing. So these girls firstly don't have a lot of access to a lot of opportunities, and they lack aspirations because nobody's ever engaged with them the kind of opportunities that are available to them. So they either limit themselves on the traditional work that they've seen their family do, or they try and expand, but it has to be in the same nature of work. So you can't drastically try and change the type of work that they all engage with, right? So if they're comfortable with home work, right? Most of the women that are working are home-based workers. They're self-employed workers. They're used to working at their own terms, conditions, and they have a very set pattern of how they are working. So you can't expect them to suddenly go into the market and start working because the market is not conducive for these women workers to enter. It's a very, very male-dominated market. The ways you navigate the labor market is also never explained to the girls. It's never part of any kind of training that, any kind of skill-based training, if you look, it's never how you engage with the market. It's only now when, we see a small section of girls starting to engage with that we also look at that aspect. But it's mostly that. The other is also, they will be comfortable in the kind of setup that they are, right? Because like I said, these are women who belong to the bottom of the pyramid, right? So their socioeconomic conditions also play a huge factor of how they are engaging with the market, right? So you cannot expect them to suddenly start stepping out of the houses. Firstly, there is a lot of negotiations that these women have to do within the household, within the immediate bottlenecks or stakeholders, or who we call as guardians of the communities. If it's a minority community, you will have certain people who are guarding the community. Then with the outside world, and what COVID has done really is actually stop that transition. Women were starting to engage. There was a lot of changes that we did see, but because of the lockdown, what it has done, especially with the women and the young girls we work with, it's taken away their safe spaces and taken away their access to a lot of education, any kind of engagement that they were having to a world beyond their household. It has increased care burden on them to another extent. So it also has been a deterrent in their growth, in their journey. So it's all of these factors. So before we try and change and even start negotiating for pay equity, right? It is the conditions that need to be worked on, both at enabling the girls and the women to start engaging with the labor market, and second, for the labor market to allow them to start coming in. And then we get into the questions of fair wages. So all of these factors do come in. I might not have a very direct answer to the question, but these are some of the thoughts that do play in of why women don't see themselves as that we can also do higher skilled jobs, is because they are never given the opportunity, and because the system is such that it doesn't allow them to grow up the ladder that easily. It takes a lot of struggle and a lot of fight for them to even reach those higher skilling jobs.
Thanks so much, Punar. I just have a quick follow-up question, open to all three of the panelists, but I think that all three of you have to some extent mentioned the role of an enabling environment, whether it's in terms of labor rights or maternity, childcare, and other sort of community facilities, right? And I want to understand, in your opinion, how much of the problem that we're discussing right now can actually be attributed to a larger decent work crisis in the country, and how much of our work needs to be targeted at improving that enabling environment. So it would be great if you could touch upon how strong that link is and what it might take to make the workplace and working more attractive for women specifically, but also just in general to address decent work constraints and deficits in India. Madhu, would you like to open? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I think that's a very pertinent question, Sadha. My own personal thing is also that, in India, we've kind of taken a route which is, mainly, if you look at the economic growth model, is mainly based around services. Now, this has a particular implication in the sense that, only, whether it is men or women, it has to be from a particular profile, so therefore you have to, be of a particular, personality, you have to have speaking skills, so it's more oriented towards, education, highly tilted in favor of, the more educated among the youth, which is, I think, so we're not really a manufacturing, center for the world, which is a route that, many of our other neighbors have taken. So now, so therefore how many jobs are actually available is therefore, and particularly for the profiles that, we would all like to see them and see a change in, so that's really very, very limited. And so therefore, there is a larger policy environment also, which is kind of, responsible for the kind of situation that exists. So there is too many people chasing too few, jobs, and therefore, and whatever jobs exist in particular sectors, like, for example, software, IT, etc. Now, how many of our, girls or even boys, can actually, I mean, the kind of rural, still, I mean, the kind of percentage of population that resides in the rural is significantly high. Now, if you look at the kind of learning outcomes, which, every year the ASA report flags for us, I mean, what are we, and as a country, how much are we investing into our primary education or even, middle and higher level education? So, so all these are, I think, imperatives, also larger imperatives that I think are extremely important for us to do. And of course, other enablers also, for example, I mean, see, why is the garment sector being able to attract so many women? One is that, it is a gender, there is a particular segregation which is at play, but, also various other kinds of enablers that the garment industry has put in, recognizing the fact that it will always have a predominant female workforce. So therefore, enablers like in-house accommodation, fooding, and even though, I think Naina said about, mostly male supervisors, but in my recent visit to Tirupur and the garment industries, I mean, I saw a fair number of women also in the supervisor grade. And actually, the employers are becoming sensitive to also employing supervisors who can also speak to the, the workforce in, say, Hindi or Uriya, etc., recognizing that the entire Tirupur garment industry is actually based upon the availability of migrants from, Bihar and Orissa and Jharkhand. So, but of course, it may not all, there are many other sectors where these kind of enablers may not be there. So I think, there is a need to engage with employers and to work on, mindset shifts, and also, very concrete, things which actually impact. Now, how many employers are actually, kind of also thinking about, in many cases, women have kind of come back because, of deterioration in their health, because they've not been able to cope up. So now, I mean, even after, formal enablers like ESIC cards, etc., still, when it comes to implementation, etc., there are gaps still. So I think, yeah, I mean, all those factors, etc., we have to see housing, mobility, and access to healthcare, and access to, we're talking about one nation, one card, but, women migrants, are they really able to access subsidized rations when they move to, say, Tirupur or any other place? So, yeah, I'll pause here.
Great. Thank you so much, Madhu. That was a very eloquent answer to my question. We have time for one last question. If anyone from the audience would like to unmute themselves and speak, else I have received a message in the chat, which also we can address.
I think Nivedita's hand was up. Yeah, she said.
Yes. Go ahead, Nivedita.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly get into the question. I'm very inquisitive because I attend so many different panels, right? And we all know that there are so many deep-rooted underlying issues when it comes to women's participation in the workforce. But I would just want to understand from any of you, if it was in your power, what is that one constraint that you would resolve that's, in your opinion, the most pressing and urgent?
Invest in quality primary education.
By that, do you mean pedagogy-wise, in terms of how and what?
Pedagogy-wise, invest in good teachers, invest in good infrastructure. How many of the schools in rural areas have a computer? Very few. So, I mean, how do you have digital literacy, etc.? and invest into, aspirations, etc. If you don't have, you must have all seen Ravish's, YouTube videos. I mean, we've all seen. I mean, so many teachers without, so many schools without adequate, teachers, or, the quality of teachers. So all those are really things to be worked upon. And those are very critical years where, the teachers' engagement, we've all, grown up with teachers as our role models, so if that is, not there, if our teachers are kind of, continuously kind of, not encouraging us, so then what hope do we have, our children have?
Let's make this a rapid fire round. Nayana and Punarbhava.
Yeah, I would of course say if it is in my power, I would change the norm. The norm around girls not going to school, norm around girls not given enough importance for having a career, girls given the burden of taking care of the families, girls not allowing for mobility. So the whole norm around gender-based discrimination is what is keeping us away from women's labor force participation, because in this kind of a normative society, if you push women to labor force participation, it is going to be drudgery, it is going to be double burden, it is going to be a very, very unequal and unfair system that we are pushing them further into.
Yeah. Mine would be very, very similar, but I think if it's something that we should really focus on is education, but also life skills for a lot of these things. And another thing that we should really focus on is the issues of migration, because that is something that really affects the labor force participation, affects the education of a lot of systems. So, not how can we make migration within the country a safe process? So safe and secure migration and go to source and destination. I think that is something that I would like to, that would be.
Great. Thanks so much to all three of you. We have one final question that I think we have time for, since we have 10 more minutes. And this question is from Smriti, and she asks, organizing workers appears to be a critical method for gaining recognition and rights for women's labor. What are the kinds of pushbacks and challenges that are experienced when organizing women workers in India? And I think this is a great question. I would really like all three of you to respond to this, since at some level, all three of you work on bringing women together and organizing them. So whoever would like to start, please go ahead, but would love to hear from all three of you on this point.
So I think, yeah, Punarbhava, please go ahead.
Thank you. See, the challenge with organizing and the kind of pushback is, firstly, it's very, the community can't see women coming together, having an organized strength. It is something that it scares them. That is why SEVA is the only women's union in India at this point of time. Yes, there are women workers, part of other unions also, but just a union which is of women workers, especially informal women workers, is one, because it's a lot of challenge to the patriarchal setup that the country is in. It's challenging to them, and so they can't see women trying to demand their rights and ask for things that are rightfully theirs. So that is one kind of backlash that is there. And just with a lot of changes that have been coming in terms of the labor codes, in terms of the kind of perceptions that the workers have, access to a lot of schemes, what it is doing is it is not recognizing a lot of work that is there. For example, domestic work as part of the labor codes is somewhere not recognized as an informal source of work or as an unorganized sector. Those are challenges that the recognition part is still missing in a lot of the, how do I say, in the structure of the government. Yes, there is a recognition in the community, in the market force of the kind of work that they do, but there is no of a recognition that comes for them. But the kind of challenges that they come in is and that their work also becomes, especially labor, becomes such a secondary thing for them because they're also double burdened with all the additional responsibility, childcare. So their movement or any kind of organizing also becomes an organizing for issues that affect women at large, women in the community. So it also is not always directed towards labor. It can be multiple things that these women who are organized are trying to work together, right? So, and the basic challenges of nobody allows them to become part of tripartite discussions. Nobody allows them a platform where they can come forward and take part. And any kind of power that is given to them, more often than not, is subdued by the male partner also, or just it is taken away. So, it takes away from a lot of rightful things. So women have to continuously keep fighting. And then the entire worker movement then also becomes about, we have to overcome multiple other challenges for us to even start demanding the worker right. So I think those are challenges and pushback that at least women in India continue to face. Yeah.
So we've been working with organizing women into self-help groups. But, typically, if you talk to women in a self-help group, their own identity is not that of a, their identity or perception about the group is also not that of, that it is a forum which is kind of, a workers' forum. So it is basically a women's group. So that is the identity, and their own identities also, therefore, reflecting from that definition of the self-help group as a forum is also, is the identity of a woman, which may be different from her identity as a worker identity or as an economic actor. Now, because of the fact that we've been working mainly in rural areas where agriculture is one of the, primary sources of livelihood, and, within agriculture also, because agriculture is tied to land ownership. So therefore, even though the government, policy architecture has tried to define, and broad base the definition of a farmer, but still, when it comes to, in our day-to-day realities of women, the predominant identity of a farmer tends to be that of a man, be it in the community or be it among the, stakeholders and policy, actors. Now, this, of course, has several implications, and in recent times, the discourse around, women as farmers, the women farmer identity discourse has, picked up in the country. So there is, of course, more discussion now as compared to, say, 5-6 years earlier. But there are several, things which are kind of tied to land ownership. For example, your ability to get a line of credit under the KCC, Kisan Credit Card, or the extension, the agriculture extension system also being geared more towards men, and that to larger farmers particularly, and not really being so sensitive to the needs of smaller farmers and women farmers. So all these are kind of, limitations. And also, if you look at market systems, particularly within the overall, marginalization of smallholder farmers within agriculture markets, women are particularly, marginalized in the sense of, that there is no normative, acceptance of women really coming into markets with their produce and, selling and negotiating with the buyers. So there's a double whammy. one, that smallholder farmers themselves, because of the limited nature of the produce availability, is very difficult. The operative costs just turn out to be formidable. And within that, the ability of women to get an entry into these markets, of course, is very, very difficult. So there is therefore a very clear case for women to be organized. Now, if you look at the FPO policy also, there's no clear, focus or articulation around, women being organized into FPO. So there is a encouragement, but no clear directive to actually form women FPO. So that's again, another factor which we kind of have to see.
Yeah, so Sadhna, I'm very conscious that I have 3 minutes. I'll try to finish it in 2, because Madhu and Punerbhava have responded to it with all their seriousness. So what I want to say here is that probably the person who was asking the question was talking about organizing women appears to be a critical method for gaining recognition and rights for women's labor, because women are working all the time. It's important to recognize them as workers, and there are these barriers that Punerbhava and Madhu talked about that are there for bringing recognition to their work. And those are the things that we have to take into consideration. The only thing I would add as a method of doing it is that there are organizations who come under bigger political parties. Mostly the left parties have a left-wing women's organization who are raising these issues of women's work and recognition of women's work for a very long time. And probably it's a good time to bring all of these people together along with the business entities, wherein the Dalit Women's Association and the Fisher Folk Women's Association and Agricultural Association of AIKS, and everybody coming together and forming a formidable force of recognizing women's work at all levels. And there is no question about it that women are at various different levels. So as Punerbhava or Madhu or we are oppressed in a patriarchal system, but our oppression is very different from the oppression of a Dalit woman or a Dalit Muslim woman who's in a particular context with disability, which is also coming from the bottom 5% of the pyramid. So understanding all of that and taking all of that into consideration is something that I think it's a good time to do that. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And a special thanks to all the 3 panelists, Punerbhava, Madhu, and Nayana. It was so great sharing the last 90 minutes with you for this discussion. I had a superb afternoon. I will now hand it back to Pranay to close the session out, and thanks to everyone who joined us today.
Thanks, Sadhna, for the wonderful moderation. Thank you so much, panelists. I think the topic was not easy. There were so many layers to it and dimensionality that in silos we couldn't have discussed this. I mean, to sum this up, the choices of women to work in labor market is absolutely influenced by patriarchy and social norm, restricting their mobility, restricting their decision making. If you're talking about livelihood, do they get to decide the asset that has been created about livelihood or not is a big question. If we are talking about agriculture, are we also talking about the nutrition that needed for, women, those who are going to participate in? Do you recognize women as labor who is contributing in this economy or not? Maybe do we recognize them as a farmer or not? These are the larger questions, I think, that need to be addressed for sure. I mean, if I have to sum up and say how market has been behaving is that you cannot shake hand with flinched fist, and this market is actually coming with this fist and shaking hand when it comes to discussing, anything to do with gender. And this norm or this patriarchal norm, which is antithetical or working against this women in particular, need to be challenged, changed. And I think men need to understand how need to be an ally to it. I've seen them in extremes, either they are patronizing or condescending. I think they need to understand how to be a better ally. ये औरतों का issue है. This is to do with women. I think this problematic statement, something that we should never entertain and need to be called out whenever and however possible. Thank you so much, all the panelists and the moderator, Satna, SKI team for helping us broadcast this on YouTube. That was a great help, Anisha. Thank you so much. There is a team which has been working behind to make this success. I think Smriti, Subhojit, Ritika, Ishika, all of these members have worked right from drafting email to reaching out to Satwa family to coordinating with this panelist. A lot has gone in it. DEI team at Satwa actually ran this whole campaign for a month in celebration of International Women's Day, when we wrote about certain things which are very important to be discussed: reproductive rights, livelihood rights, in terms of microaggressions, mansplaining. Couple of these articles which our team members wrote to highlight the issue that needed an attention. So really thankful to Satwa family, the leadership team in Satwa, and the DEI team for making this happen. Without you, this wouldn't have been possible. And once again, thank you to our lovely panelists. Very educative and eye-opening for me, at least, for sure. Thank you so much. On this note, I'm closing this panel discussion and look forward to the action to what all we have discussed now. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.